This week, Suzuki announced a big update to their large capacity adventure tourer, the V-Strom 1050. They're now calling it the Master of Adventure, and with the new DE model, there's specifically a push towards making it more capable when riding off-road. The DE replaces the XT model of the previous generation, and it really does get a lot of updates here. So in this video, we'll go through all of the details to find out if this really does look like a decent off-roader. First up, the XT does sit a little low for off-road riding. In fact, it's got pretty much the same stance as the standard road-biased V-Strom 1050. And while the fully adjustable KYB 43mm upside-down fork and the KYB link-type shock at the rear might appear to be pretty much the same, there are new internals with new spring rates, new valves, and new piston settings that ought to make it a much better ride on rough terrain. At the same time, it gets more travel, which is always going to be good news. There's 170mm at the front now, 169mm at the rear, and so that's roughly 10mm front and rear up on the 160 of the standard bike. That's one of the factors that gives the DE much more ground clearance at 190mm compared to the 165 of the standard bike. So of course that's going to make it much more capable on rocky trails and for navigating obstacles. Still, for a bit of context, take the Africa Twin base model, for example, which is the most off-road focused bike in their lineup. That gets 230mm of travel at the front, 220mm at the rear, and then 250mm of ground clearance. So clearly, the V-Strom 1050 is still going to have its limitations, but it's still an improvement all the same. Another limiting factor on the previous Gen XT was the 19-inch front wheel, which is clearly still better than out-and-out road wheels, but not the full 21 inches that you'll get on the Africa Twin, the Tiger 1200 Rally models, or the KTM Super Adventure R. But the new DE model addresses this shortcoming with a proper 21-incher, and it'll also now be shod with an all-round adventure tyre from Dunlop called the Trail Max Mix Tour. Suzuki say they were specifically developed for the new DE model, with a semi-block pattern that gives solid performance on the road, as well as good grip and agile handling when exploring away from the highway. But if road riding and touring are more your thing, then there's still the base model with the 19 front, 17 rear cast wheels that should offer a little better handling in that environment. So big changes to the wheels and suspension, and as a result, Suzuki have had to tweak the frame geometry to compensate. The DE gets its own dedicated dimensions, with more rake and a longer swing arm, both contributing to a longer wheelbase. Suzuki claimed that the effect of this is to give the bike more stability, which ought to be valuable when riding off-road. On top of that, they've revised the battery and mudguard brackets on the subframe, beefing them both up to better support the input load from unpaved surfaces. Some of the electronic shortcomings of the last bike have also been addressed. Take the ABS, for example, now being made switchable at the rear wheel. Turning it off allows the rider to use the rear brake properly to slide the back end, which helps with navigating tight turns, or you can just impress your mates with some massive skids. Now the front isn't switchable from what I can tell, but still the rear is probably more meaningful, and they also say that this update is delivered in a new Bosch ABS unit for both bikes that's smaller and lighter. Next, there's a new traction control setting called G mode or gravel mode, and essentially it's a setting that's just a little bit above being completely off, the idea being that it lets you slide the bike and spin the back wheel up on rougher surfaces. That should also help to maintain momentum when you're riding uphill on loose surfaces, but there's still just enough TC there to stop things getting completely out of control. As for riding modes, you still get the 3 modes of A, B, and C, but they have made a little tweak to the throttle action, the physical action of the throttle rather, adding a touch more resistance, especially where the throttle initially opens. Suzuki say that this improves the controllability with a more natural feel and a faithful response, particularly when riding on gravel roads. I guess sometimes I've noticed when you're riding certain bikes on rough roads or off-road, if it does have a really light ride-by-wire throttle, it can bounce around a little bit more, so that's a good tweak. Cruise control also gets a useful update, so it's now usable in second gear or higher at engine speeds between 2,000 and 7,000 RPM, which translates, according to Suzuki, to vehicle speeds of roughly 15 to 100 miles per hour. So I believe that's a wider range, and it is quite a handy feature when you're touring. Average speed checks or low speed limits in urban areas are easy to creep over if you're not laser focused on your speed, and so it's just another use for the cruise control system beyond that motor motorway big miles at 70. To manage all these new modes and settings, there's now a 5-inch TFT display, which does look like a big improvement on the previous generation's LCD. In fact, it looks pretty similar to the dash that you'll find on their sports tourer, the GSX S1000 GT. The only thing I noticed though is that there isn't any word in the press release about the V-Strom of any of the connectivity features like navigation. Still, fear not, the easiest way to add navigation to any bike is with Beeline Moto, a super sleek little device that won't clutter your cockpit and provides simple navigation prompts powered by their awesome smartphone app. Fully recommended. I use mine on pretty much all of my rides, but to be transparent, I will say they are a channel sponsor, but there are links down in the description below in case you're interested in finding out more about it. Now, Suzuki have also made plenty of ergonomic improvements in order to improve the off-road riding experience. So there are now new handlebars that sit 40mm wider for a little more leverage, and they're also made using thicker tubing yet with softer aluminium. This allows for a little more flex, and they say that increases comfort on bumpy rides. The foot pegs have also been made a little wider for more grip, and they now feature a steel construction as opposed to aluminium for increased durability. The seat has also been made more rigid and offers less flex, so it shouldn't squidge around so much under hard riding. Definitely good if you're off-road, but unfortunately it's no longer height adjustable between two positions. Still, the upside is that it's 700 grams lighter and yet at the same time more robust. The effect of all these changes is that although the seat stays in the same place, the rider triangle is canted back a little bit at the bars and the foot pegs are a little further forward, so presumably they've done this to help with the standing position off-road and also to help with that transition in and out of the saddle. Now, on top of these tweaks, the windscreen on the DE model is 80mm shorter, so quite a substantial drop there, and it's also ever so slightly narrower. Suzuki claim they've done this to give the rider better visibility when riding on trails. Obviously it's going to get a little more dirty, so it makes it more difficult to see through, but also it'll stop you headbutting it when you're riding in the standing position. Again, the standard bike is still available, so if road riding and touring is your focus, then that big touring screen is going to keep you a little better protected from the wind, which is going to help keep you fresh on long stints. Now, crash protection is obviously important if you're riding off-road, unless you're planning on not dropping the bike. Good luck. So it's great that crash bars are standard fitment now on the DE, as is the aluminium sump guard, which looks reasonably robust. That said, if you're intending on giving it a serious thrashing, you'll probably still want to see what's available on the aftermarket for both the crash bars and the sump guard. They've also reworked the front mud guard. I guess they had to do this anyway to accommodate that larger 21-inch wheel, but it looks like they took the opportunity to beef it up. It's got a new 3-piece structure, and that should help to protect it from spills. Now, the big V-twin at the heart of this bike is pretty much the same, so you still get a touch over 100 horsepower and 100 newton meters of peak torque, but there are some nice little improvements here and there. So it now gets sodium-filled hollow exhaust valves, and these help to reduce the temperature in the combustion chamber, not only giving it a better feel, the engine, and more efficiency, but also improving durability. There's now a standard up and down quick shifter on that DE model, and also improvements to the gearbox, which Suzuki claim combine to deliver smoother, easier shifting and greater riding fun with a more linear shift feel when going through the gears. Specifically, there's a higher ratio in both first gear and sixth gear, and so that gives it a more natural transition between first and second, and then I guess better cruising in sixth. On top of that, more sturdy links and larger diameter pins give the chain some extra strength, again playing into this new off-road focus. Now, in the looks department, both models get new graphics and also some new color options. So the DE is now available in yellow, blue and black, and the standard bike now comes in blue, grey, red or black as well. Specifically with the DE, I think this taller stance and larger front wheel just give it a bit more aggression and a bit more of that dirt bike style. Look, here it is side by side with the outgoing XT. I think it looks like an improvement, but let me know which one you'd pick down in the comments below. Now, it'll be in dealers from early 2023. There's no price as of yet, but the XT at the moment costs $12,399, so I'd expect at least a little more than that. And I think in that sort of region, it's a decent price for a fairly well-equipped bike with some nice new features, and it's still a lot less than the big premium adventure bikes like the Multistrada V4 or the BMW GS or the Tiger 1200. I guess the only worry for Suzuki in offering this budget-friendly, large-capacity adventure bike is that they don't want to get too close to that base Africa Twin at £13,049. I reckon that'll still easily be the better bike off-road with all that extra travel and height. But still, Suzuki have made some nice improvements, and so if they can undercut it significantly, it could still be a popular bike. As always, I'd love to know what you think of it though, down in the comments below. Would you consider that new DE model, or is the Africa Twin worth the extra few £100? Let me know what you think down in the comments, and if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.